granite. Just when I'm talking to exploration companies, I call these convergent zones. So the granites are causing compression, and I call these divergent zones. The structures are diverging, and you need strike slip duplexing to fill up essentially a dilational zone, a low pressure zone in here. This is a very, very common place to find gold deposits all over the world. It's essentially a strain gradient of maximum compression in here. These things are sliding out in here, and essentially you get a sort of dilation zone, a low mean stress zone somewhere in here. You see there are no big gold deposits along here where things are normal. It's only in here. You can do computer models. So this is a computer model, and this is a rigid block like a granite. I've just put a fault down the side of it because this is often the case along these granites. They've got a big shear zone, a fault zone along one zone. There's sigma 1. There, that's the computer. So we're deforming this in a computer environment. You can see if we measured sigma 1 there, it would appear to be there, or sigma 1 here would appear to be here. In other words, as we come towards these rigid blocks, if we do a structural analysis using some sort of indicator, kinematic indicator of where the stresses were, we would be totally wrong for the regional stress as we came towards the block. Interestingly, if you put the fault there, the low mean stress zone, the dilation zone, if we think of it simply as there and there, if we didn't put the fault there, the dilation zone would be there and there. So in other words, the pressure shadow would be there. If we hadn't got that fault in there, if we put the fault in, the pressure shadow appears in there. Now here's some actual examples schematically that my students have done. So here's an extremely complicated granite. So what the student did was he tried to find, there's lots of pits here, so lots of open pits, a lot of exposure. So what he did is he looked at fault kinematics and folds and other things, and he tried to indicate where sigma 1 was at the time of gold mineralization. And you can see when you're far away, sigma 1 is where you'd expect it. But as you come close to the granite, it goes all over the place. So in places, it's almost a right angle. So if you measured sigma 1 there, you'd think the compression was coming from this direction down here. Can everyone understand what I'm... So these are measuring sort of fossil stresses from the rocks. And when you look at where the gold deposits are, the biggest one is there. So you see absolute chaos. All the stresses are being effectively deflected by this complex granite, just in there. The second biggest one is there, and the third biggest one is up here somewhere. So where the stresses are being deflected around, in other words, the rocks are flowing around these rigid bodies essentially. They can't just deform normally. This was a case where this Granny Smith granite, that was the one I showed you that was very bleached, and we've got sigma 1 there, and one of my students called Yuhani Oyala, he measured the stresses, and you can see they all work out perfectly in the granite and out here, and then there are places where they see that one there's gone off, that one there, these have gone crazy. So the stress here is not reflecting the regional stress. You can see down here they're gone crazy. So the big deposit was sitting here, and a smaller one down here. This is a very good example where the shape of the granite was important. Here, is this to wipe the board? So what was happening here was that the granite was coming down, shallowing out like that, and then turning over like that. So there's the section. Sigma 1 is like that. If we think of a fault on this boundary, it's going to be like that. So this sort of opens up. in there. That's a dilation zone. So there's dilation in there. And what was happening was a whole lot of fracture zones were occurring in the granite like that. And then where this went over, we were actually getting, this was low grade gold. And here we had high grade gold in the sedimentary rocks, just like that. And the shape of this contact was determining exactly where the mineralisation was. So what we did was we worked out what the shape of the granite contact was, and then we used a computer simulation, a geophysics package, to predict. So we were trying to follow it along here. What was the likely shape of the section 50 metres away? Then they were drilling it. And then we drill that, see if it worked, then we projected 50 metres and drill it again. This was a company who was drilling it. And the CEO of the company got up at a meeting and said he'd saved 60% of his drilling budget by understanding this stress distribution around the granites here. So what he did was put a section, the student put it into a computer, stressed it in section and predicted where the low mean stresses would be, and then they drilled them. So here's a case that's very important. The interesting thing about this study was that I'd studied tin deposits, and I noticed that they were often where you're getting change and dip of granite contacts. So I asked the mine manager, could I have all the pierce points of the drill holes so I could make, it was before the days of micromine and all these sort of things, so we were actually doing a structure contour in the old way like we used to do for oil and everything else in the old days, doing structure contour here. It took me 3 months, he wouldn't give me the data. And it had to go to the board to get him to give me the data, which saved them millions of dollars, as it turned out, in drilling in the end, which is quite an interesting story. So granites are very important in changing the stress field because they're rigid. I'm nearly finished this.
Okay, good time.
And we can perhaps use this in exploration. Here's the biggest gold deposit of this type in the world. It's been called an intrusion-related gold system. This is an intrusion-related Fort Knox. This is 500 metres across granite. This is 10. Look at the size of the granite bodies here. But what's important, they've done a gravity inversion. They've got gravity data, worked out the depth of the granite contact. And you can see that big ridge sticking out there. The granite is sticking out in a great ridge there, and the gold deposit is sitting right where you'd expect. All the stresses, if you had a stress field like this, it would be deflected all the way around this ridge in here. The second biggest one is over here. See a similar ridge, another ridge coming down in here. They're sitting at these ridge points, and so you could use this on a regional sense. For example, another one might be down in there or down in here. You can see very steep gradient and a shallow gradient. So that granite contact is very steep and then shallowing off. It's doing exactly what that one is there. You can see very steep, shallowing off. So we're getting shapes that we like, and we're getting also pressure shadows. We're getting deflection essentially of the stress fields around these. So you can use, I think you can use these sort of things as a regional prospecting tool if you've actually got the data. Here's a very good example. See one of these throats. So there's what I call convergence. There's what I call divergence. And this is Southern Cross. It's the biggest town in the region, is sitting in there. Here we've got these a dome, and this funny shape, star-shaped in between. Go back to the previous slide. For example, look at this. There's the dome, and the deposit sitting in that zone between them. It's exactly the same sort of thing as we're seeing down here.